Hello, and we are back again. 2 days on the trot.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. I don't think we've ever done. Have we ever done one back to back like this?
I don't think so.
Although technically it's not back to back. It's the same. It's the same book, but yeah. So today we're doing Atomic Habits, the second part, and we're going to be continuing on from where we left off. I think last time we finished by talking about the first law, which was make it obvious. Talking about how to make cues obvious so that you're more likely to engage in certain habits, or if it's bad habits, then hide them, make them invisible. So then the second law that we're going to be moving on to, should we just jump in straight away?
Let's go straight away. So the second law is make it attractive. And then the inverse of the second law is, I believe, make it unattractive.
Yes.
So you've got here how to make a habit irresistible. And then you've got supernormal stimuli is a heightened version of reality. Think Photoshop models that tends to enhance our reaction more than normal. The aim is to make stimuli more enticing and rewards that become more concentrated. Habits are dopamine-driven feedback. Feedback loop. Sorry, dopamine is the anticipation molecule that aids in motivation, learning, and memory, punishment and aversion, and more. I remember he was actually the guy who first brought up supernormal stimuli to me, because I think he referenced the book of supernormal stimuli.
Is there a book on it?
There is, yeah, because it's talking about how biology can sort of be hijacked, right? Like you said here, supernormal stimuli is something it's a stimulus that's kind of not normal, therefore it's super, in the sense that like a woman's body is meant to be a specific shape, but sometimes with the Photoshop model they accentuate specific elements to be not normal, therefore super. And I think a lot of the examples he was using in that sort of book as well was the supernormal stimuli of like the shape of things that beetles wanted to have sex with. I don't know if you've ever heard the example when a dung beetle tries to have sex like a bottle or something, because the bottle resembles the perfect shape of a female beetle. But it's like an exaggerated female beetle, like just the shape basically turns this beetle on and it goes and tries to have sex with like bottles. But that was one of the examples they were using.
It's interesting. I wonder if it's that, like, because is it that it's so attractive visually, or is it that like it's so rare? Do you know what I mean? As in, like, you've never seen a woman look like this. It's like
exactly.
So rare.
It's an exaggerated version. I guess, in fact, even looking at here, this is what they're sort of arguing for pornography being a supernormal stimuli too, because it's an exaggerated version of the real act of having sex. If that makes sense. Like because they're overplaying the roles they play. They exaggerate what's like, maybe the submissiveness of the female, whatever. It's therefore a supernormal stimuli. It's
weird. Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, I get you.
That was it. Another one, another example they got, and I forgot about this one. It's the one where researchers created things that look like eggs, and they put it next to a bird, and it would like go back and like sit on it, just because it doesn't know anything other than the stimuli. Like it doesn't have any other way of verifying if these eggs are real. It was literally like stones. So I think it took their real eggs and put stones underneath, and it still continued its behavior.
It's weird how we are, like our biology, like you said, can be hijacked in that sense. I think this is the first time I've kind of come across supernormal stimuli, but it's quite interesting, and it does make sense that it does tie into the kind of dopamine aspect, because it's enhancing that dopamine release. And she says, I think to jump on is that dopamine is released when you receive a reward and when it is anticipated. Yeah. So I think this is the first book that kind of introduced me to dopamine as well, because then didn't we go on to the molecule more after this?
We did definitely go on to it afterwards. Yeah.
And that dopamine is the like desire. It's all about desire. And it's not the fulfillment of the habit, but that it's the desire of it that gets us to take action. And I thought that was particularly interesting, because I think that was kind of I couldn't get my head around it the first time I read it, because it sounded pretty odd. It's like, surely completing the action is the thing that gives you that fulfillment, but actually it's the desire that creates you to make you want to go back and do it again.
I wonder as well whether the actual release of dopamine itself makes you feel uncomfortable. Does that make sense? So how do you generate desire? I guess you make you feel bad in the moment to then want something to release you from the feeling of bad. Do you kind of get what I mean? Like almost like dopamine, almost dopamine could even be I don't know. I'm just speculating here. Dopamine could be something which actually causes uncomfort within yourself, because then it motivates you to go towards the state that you imagined. So you imagine something, and then dopamine's released. It makes you feel pain, so therefore you want to change your state to follow through to this to the like the action that you need to take, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's true, but I would assume that there's got to be some level of like, because if you think a lot of these habits we're talking about revolve a lot around discomfort, and I'm just wondering whether that's the dopamine trigger of like, or maybe actually that's the argument could be the opposite. It's like the lack of dopamine, so you feel discomfort because your dopamine levels have gone down. So you're like, fuck, give me some more. That would actually probably make more sense.
But also on that note, I wonder if the reason why it's more about desire rather than the fulfillment of it is that because we always want more. Do you get what so like, as soon as you get that dopamine hit, right, you've had it, but we always want more in that sense. So the next time we come across that cue, I wonder if it's like, I want more than I have right now. Do you get what I mean? So it's like, you're always imagining trying to get more. So it's more about the desire rather than the fulfillment. Because as soon as you get that dopamine hit, it's done.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Of course. But, and then you're back to the state of like no dopamine, I guess, or like or low dopamine. Therefore, you need to do the next thing, which increases your dopamine levels to like chase the next thing, and then you're back to square one again. You're like, okay, and then you're like, oh, let's go again. That would make
So then I think the next point he says is or that I've got is, the more attractive we make our habits, the more they will motivate us to act, because of the expectation of the rewarding experience. So we're expecting this really rewarding experience, and so we're more likely to act on it if it is rewarding in general.
No, I guess a lot of these, I mean, some of the habits that we were like talking about yesterday do revolve around some level of like pleasure, don't they? If you're talking about the main ones that affect most of us, such as, you know, eating sugary food, that involves pleasure. I guess the whole feeling of boredom and resulting to using your phone and scrolling is another dopamine pleasurable hit. So all of these activities are pleasurable, so to speak, and therefore rewarding in some way. And I guess this is why things are, or can be seen as more addictive than others, are the things that are more pleasurable, right? Like the things that are the most addictive in the world are the ones that give you the biggest spikes in dopamine, so to speak, I would assume.
Yeah. If you think social media is like designed to do
no, but like if you think about it, like everything that people would say is like a vice is related to overindulgence in pleasure, so to speak. Like like video games, dopamine hit, social media is dopamine hit, nicotine is it's not dopaminergic, whatever you call it.
Yeah,
but it's still the same thing. It's a pleasure hit. It's sugar's a pleasure hit.
It's just some have more than others.
And the point being, I guess, with this is the more attractive or rewarding a habit is, the more likely it is to be repeated.
Yeah.
And this is why it's so hard to be addicted to eating vegetables, because they taste so bland.
Yeah. You just got to get better at cooking, and then you know.
That could be the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, mate. It's systems, not goals, mate. You know?
That's it.
Yeah, that's funny. So then there's this part that he calls temptation bundling. And he says temptation bundling works by linking an action you want to do with an action you need to do. And this improves the attractiveness of a habit, because I guess, you know, there are multiple ways to make something more attractive at the end of the day, an action more attractive. And this is one of them. And if you already have that stability, like we were talking about yesterday, having that bit of a daily routine, something that you do every day, and you link it to that. So that way, you know, you can, especially if it's one that you enjoy, then it's more attractive.
It's funny you say this, because I know it's called temptation bundling, but I never really thought of it as that. But I realized I do it quite a lot. Like the majority of times I upload a Wise Words book summary is sat in front of a TV. Like I'm watching something in the background and I'm just plodding along, uploading it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I actually look forward to that time because I feel like I'm doing work, but also at the same time I'm doing the thing I wanted to do, which is just relax on the sofa.
Yeah.
So I actually do some of my favorite times of the day is when I'm like, I'm going to enjoy myself by putting something on in the background, even if I'm not giving it my full attention. It's good to just feel relaxed on a sofa, let's just say, and then I'm going to do the work, if that makes sense. And I don't even see it as a chore. Then it's like, oh, I'm doing this. I'm comfortable. You know, there's something on in the background. I'm like mildly distracted. And I feel like that's kind of what he really means by this sort of temptation bundling, or at least that's how I interpret it.
No, I would say exactly the same thing.
You pair it with something that you already want to do. So whether it's, oh, I really want to watch this TV series, but at the same time, I need to DM somebody on Instagram. So, for example, for my business, I'll be sending messages on Instagram to people. Yeah. And if I'm just sat on, watching a movie, it's really easy, it's mind-numbing work. But because I paired it with the film I wanted to see, let's just say, it instantly becomes actually an enjoyable experience because I'm doing what I wanted to do, but also doing something on the side. I actually love doing work just watching TV, especially when it's like something that I don't have to be really engaged in. And it's more like admin work. I tell you, good TV programs are like the ones that you can dive in and out of, and you don't really need to be paying full attention to it the whole time. I guess like comedy programs, I guess like I don't know,
Suits, mate. Yeah, everyone watches Suits in the background and does work.
But that's, I guess there's other ways you can do that. To use temptation bundling, which isn't just TV related. But I guess it's the premise is like if you want to do something, try and pair it with something you don't want to do, because as long as they're like mutually compatible, if that makes sense. Like you can't of course. You can't watch a film and work out at the same time. I mean, you could try it, but can you imagine there like on a rowing machine or something like, oh, this is insane. This is so fun. Like, but yeah.
He says that it's kind of rooted in this, what does he call it? Premax. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Principle where more probable behaviors will reinforce less probable behaviors. And it makes sense, as in like, once again, it's ingrained in like your daily life. It's something that you do all the time anyway, whether it's something that, is attractive to you, but it's something that you're drawn to do a lot. So making this actionable so you can combine habit stacking and temptation building. So it would look like, after my current habit, I will do the habit that I need. And after I do the habit that I need, I will do the habit that I want. So I got a bit confused there. But yes, so basically you're constantly building. You're doing things that you're currently doing, things that you need to do, and doing things that you want to do.
It's too bad. Originally, when I was talking about doing it at the same time, but what he's saying here is like using it like a sandwich, isn't it? So doing the habit you usually do, stacking it with something afterwards, and then rewarding yourself for it. Yeah, that's kind of like the premise here. It's like, I don't know, I wanted to eat this food today, I guess like a sugary snack or something, like a sweet. I will only get to do that if I've done this habit followed by this habit, the habit you want to start doing, and then you feel like you reward yourself for doing it, if that makes sense. Like, it could even be the same thing with what we're saying about the movie stuff. Like when I finish the day of work, I grab myself a coffee, which is what I usually do, let's just say. Followed by that, I'm going to do 30 minutes of this, and then followed by that, I'm going to do something I really love, which is watching a movie and chilling. That makes sense. And that's the perfect way to do it, because I guess you almost feel like you've rewarded yourself for doing the habit.
No, exactly. So that's what I had for that first bit of the first law. So then moving on. So the role of family and friends in shaping your habits. So I think this will be more about like social proof, I'm assuming. So we imitate the habits of three groups in particular: the close, which is like family and friends; the many, which is the tribe; and the powerful, which are those with status and prestige. So the closer we are to someone, so going off the closer we are to someone, the more likely we are to imitate some of their habits. Therefore, you should surround yourself with people who exhibit the habits you want. And this is something, I don't know if I picked it up here or I've just heard it through like, I don't know, just over the years, but it actually makes so much sense. And the older I get, the more I see it as in like, you need to surround yourself with people who kind of exhibit the habits that you want.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just so difficult. And I remember reading Jordan Peterson's book, and he always, something that stuck with me is he said that it's so much easier to go down than it is up. As in, if the people around you have terrible habits, you're more likely to conform to that because it's just comforting rather than actually struggling to be productive and do well. And yeah, it's so much like, it's so easy to drink around people who drink. Right. Mm-hmm. And if you're trying to stop drinking, it's quite difficult. Yeah,
no, it is.
It's so difficult. So new habits seem achievable when you see others doing them every day. And I made a little note here because it kind of tied in with influence and that the rule of like similarity. I don't think it was a principle. Oh, maybe it was. No, it was one of the liking things, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was on the liking. It was a subset of the liking principle.
Yeah, because in that book he gave a really good example of like he was trying to get his 3-year-old to swim and they couldn't, and then he dropped them off at like a camp or something, and he saw another 3-year-old swimming, and then he learned how to swim. And it was just interesting that like as soon as you see someone who's more similar to you doing something, especially if it's like every day and it's a habit, then you're like, okay, well, this is possible. I can do this. Influences you that way. Do you want to take the many or the tribe?
Yep. So the second imitation of the habits of the second level of the group is the many and the tribe. So we have a strong desire and motivation to belong to a tribe, meaning we adopt the habits that are praised and approved by the culture. Your culture sets the expectation for what is normal. So you join a culture where 1, your desired behavior is this norm, and 2, you already have something in common. I think that's quite an interesting point there that you made as an actionable step. So the actionable step here is you're looking for a culture where the habit you want to integrate is already the norm there. And then so you find a bunch of people or a group of people who have the desired behavior and they do it as their norm, and that you already have something in common. I guess this is kind of like the level of why Alcoholics Anonymous kind of work as well, like that sort of thing. Yeah. It's like you guys all have very similar objectives with the habits, and you're all going to mutually enforce each other's habits, so to speak, right? Yeah. Like if you're hanging out with people who have the same goal of stopping drinking, you would like to think all of you are going to avoid activities or events and behave in ways and not trying to, influence each other to drink, if that makes sense.
No, exactly. But I think like that first point that you read out says, it's like we have such a strong desire and motivation to be part of like a group, to be part of a tribe. So at the end of the day, we kind of prioritize that over, our well-being in a sense, or our productive like behavior. But that doesn't mean you can't have both. It doesn't mean you can't be in a culture or a group that actually upholds those kind of like behaviors that you want to engage in. And so if you can find your own kind of culture in that sense, if you can find your own group that manifests those kind of habits, then you're kind of winning. You've got both. I thought, that's because, it's so important to be part of a group, but you want to be part of like a productive group in that sense.
No, of course. And then the next part says the shared identity begins to reinforce your personal identity. And that, once again, that kind of makes sense if you look at it from the perspective of the, when you're building your identity, it's just your repeated behaviors that inform you of who you are. So I guess once you start sharing this identity with other people and start behaving in a way which is like them, you start to, encode their identity as your own. You start to see yourself as part of that group, the people who've given up booze or whatever.
Because otherwise there's conflict, right? Like if I don't think of myself as a smoker and everyone around me is a smoker, then there is this constant conflict between what identity I believe I want and this group identity, right? And I think you kind of do have to surround yourself with people who kind of reflect the kind of identity that you want as well.
I think it would have to, 100%. You can see, I feel like it's one of these things that you can, if you don't think this applies to you, you can just do like a mental rehearsal in your head of like being put in a situation where a bunch of people were like acting in a way that you wanted to be, and then would you act in the same way? And I feel like the majority of people would. Do you know what I mean? Even just thinking about it, like you naturally come to the conclusion of behaving the way that everybody else is behaving. Like even if you were somebody that was addicted to smoking, you went to an event and nobody was smoking, I think you would find it very hard to be the first person to put out a cigarette or something if everybody as well there is like not, it's like, you know, solely around not smoking or whatever. So,
it's like Alcohol Anonymous, and you're like an alcoholic, like rocking up, take a little sip. I agree.
What do we have next after that? So we got the find a culture and group that reinforces your identity. That way you align both your personal and social identity. The normal behavior of the tribe often overpowers the desired behavior of the individual. Truth comes second to reputation / status. And when changing your habits means challenging the tribe, change is unattractive. When changing your habits means fitting in with the tribe, change is very attractive. Okay, I like that too.
Yeah,
like the underlying motives within you to change increase when you realize the new norm is to behave this way, and I guess you almost feel like you're going to be punished if you behave in a way that's not aligned with the tribe, so to speak, right? It's that kind of like back to like, you know, creating a cult. It was all about, you know, creating new norms and enforcing these norms, and creating incentives to change.
Yes, it's like constantly reinforcing. And I wonder if, like, you know, let's say you're approaching a certain habit and you're like, okay, I need to change my identity so that I can, you know, because this is the kind of person I want to be. And then the next step is literally to find another kind of group or tribe that reflects that kind of identity. So that way you're having yourself, your habits reinforcing that identity, but you're also having the people around you reinforcing it, finding multiple different like factors that can influence you to keep that habit in that sense. Because I could imagine, like, you know, if you, and there are those things, I'm not sure if he said it in this book, but you can sign up to where you hold yourself accountable, right? Okay. So it's like you could put money on the table and it's like it will go to a charity.
Yeah, it's called like Kick or something, I think.
Yeah, I think it's something like that. I wonder if...
No, Stick, I think.
Stick. Yeah, I think that's the one, actually.
Yeah, commitment contracts in order to reach your personal goals, Yeah,
and I wonder if, you know, you could already pay for like 3 sessions to do something that, I don't know, exhibits that kind of habit, and then you're kind of committed to it. You have to follow through. I wonder if that's like a really good step after you're like, you figure out what kind of habit you want, is to straight away being like, okay, if I want to be a dancer and I want to dance, then I need to commit to, you know, I'm going to commit three lessons a week, and I'm going to put it down straight away, and I'm going to pay that money, because it holds you accountable in that sense. But then once you're in that kind of tribe, it's reinforcing. Yeah.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And then the very last one, if you want to go ahead with that.
So the powerful. So those with status and prestige. So we desire success and status. So naturally, we are motivated to indulge in habits that increase our status and avoid those that lower our status.
And therefore, we are very inclined to try and copy the habits of, you know, the rich and powerful, etc., or the people who have high status, because, you know, I guess we're naturally wired to try and emulate them, because we think a big factor of their success is their behaviors, which knowing what we know now, which is your sum total of your behaviors, it's probably not the stupidest thing to do, right?
But, no.
There is also other factors which obviously affect people's prestige or perceived prestige. Maybe it's a better way of saying it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that mimetic behavior, isn't it? It's like, you know, you see the leader or the chief of the tribe acting in a certain way, and it's like, well, I want status, I'm going to copy the way that he got to that top. But actually, it's interesting that, okay, obviously, like, people write books and things like that, but we don't know like the specific habits that these successful people engage in that we could emulate to try and get to the top in that sense. It's kind of interesting, just but then I guess some habits work for some people and not for others.
Yeah, of course. There's never like a be-all end-all of habits, I guess. I would almost try and argue again, like I was saying to you the other day about the identity stuff. The same identities end up being successful in my head, and it's always the people who are more conscientious and get shit done. Like, you think about like a meta quality that everybody would need to be successful or like do things, is to actually get things done. So therefore, for me, the meta quality of, you know, being able to get things done and like plan and do and, you know, act is probably more important than any other type of habit.
So
just the ability to commit to like a path and follow it through is the ultimate meta, quality, because that gets stuff, that gets you places, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think it's about the specific context with which you engage in this habit, but the fact that the habit will build a certain quality, right? As in, like, because business people who are successful, right, they might have done a certain thing to get to the top, but you can't do that again because now everyone's doing it, right? So there has to be an element of novelty. But if you do those kind of habits, they also build like organization, discipline, those kinds of qualities that allow you to apply it elsewhere and aren't restricted by context in that sense.
Yes,
are more applicable.
I think you need a bit of both, but I do think you have to be somebody who's relatively like able to go through their commitments, or at least act or follow a plan, a set a goal, sort of thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's probably plenty of counter examples where somebody just sort of stumbled into like massive success and did really well or whatever, but I think they would be probably more rare than common, so to speak.
Absolutely.
But yes.
So moving on.
Yeah, so I was reading this earlier and I realized this is a really good one to fit into the Notion sort of templates here. The underlying motive. So, how to find and fix the cause of your bad habits. Every behavior has a surface level craving and a deeper underlying motive. Some of our underlying motives include conserve energy, obtain food and water, find love and reproduce, connect and bond with others, win social acceptance and approval, reduce uncertainty, and achieve status and prestige. I'm trying to sort of map these onto, potential habits. Arguably, like a classic conserve energy is that maps onto bad habits in the sense of, feeling lazy, not doing the things you said you were going to do. Manifests, I guess, in a way as well of checking your phone all the time. So being lazy every time you got something, that requires a lot of thought, and you default back to like not thinking about it. Obtaining food and water. I mean, these are very basic sort of motives.
Well, it's like it kind of. I linked it to elephant in the brain. A bit. All these underlying motives that would have been our kind of like would have been our priority 10,000 years ago, but now we've kind of got other layers on top, right? And it's just interesting how like our habits are basically a manifestation of those deeper underlying motives, and how we deal with them, which I thought was quite interesting. Like all of these are very kind of like you said, very primal.
No, but they do underpin a lot of obviously behavior choice. Like
absolutely.
Like you can argue a lot of the reason why they go out and try and make a living and try and do better than other people is to win social status and prestige. And if you ask for like the deep underlying motives, it would be that. Some of the most successful people and some of the people who drive the world forward are actually just completely obsessed with their own ego and their own status, that they drive everybody forward with them, because they want to be special, And for me, I say all to them, fair play. If you really want to be special and you actually become special, change the world, it's, you're kind of vindicated in some way that you've achieved what you originally set out to be.
No, it makes a lot of sense, actually. And I thought it was only reading it this time that I kind of came across that and realized that, it makes sense. It's like if you think of them as like problems, right? Like we were talking about earlier on, how like, there's a change in state, right? And you want your solution of boredom is going on your phone. And the same thing kind of goes for these. It's like if all of these motives in a way are basically problems and the solutions are how we deal with them. And I think he goes on to say this. It says habits are problem-solving behaviors that have arisen to solve a particular underlying motive. However, this does not mean there aren't better alternative habits. And I think that kind of stuck out to me this time, because it means like, so there are solutions that we've been using over and over again, and we've just stopped asking why. And it doesn't mean there aren't like so many other better solutions.
I mean, I'll give you another like quick example. I guess is like technically what you can cook, what you can create for you to eat. It's almost like unlimited amounts. But I don't know about you, but I always find myself eating very similar things because I know how to cook the certain things I cook, and therefore it's easier to be, not have to think about new things, right? And like you just said, there's a million different ways to feed yourself. in good and bad ways, right? There's like, there's ways to feed yourself which aren't going to be, beneficial for your health. And there's obviously ones that are more beneficial. So there's always like unlimited complexity almost, which is almost why we create these habits to like restrict the fact that there's like 10 billion different combinations of food that we could possibly eat any day. And we just, restrict it down to like, what do you know how to cook? And like, I feel like this is kind of like the point, I guess, with the habit scorecard, as well as just finally being able to kind of look at what do you do and be like, okay, these aren't actually that good for me. How can I improve some of these in a small way? If that makes sense. Because obviously we all solve these problems every day. Like we're all doing this and we all probably stick to certain things. I mean, some people might have a better personality, like temperament towards novelty and doing more different things. But for me, I like to sort of eat the same thing most days. And that is technically a habit that has been grown upon and used to solve a problem of I'm hungry, I need to eat. How do I make something that's, that I know how to cook? Because there is nothing actually like, especially after a long day. And then you think, oh, fucking hell, I have to figure out what I'm going to eat now. Like I have to do something I've not done before. Whereas it's so much easier to be like, oh, I know how to cook this, and this. It's easier. I don't have to think about it as a rote. Like I'm just going to go into my automatic mode and chop it up and it's all done.
No,
like
it is.
There's always better ways to do it, right? And it's the same with sport. I can go to the gym and do these sort of exercises, or I can do these exercises, or I can do, we spoke about it before. You could play tennis instead. You could do anything which still gets you up and about and running. So there's like multiple different things that achieve the same sort of like overall objective.
And I think if you have a lot of them in your arsenal, so like if today I don't want to go to the gym, but I would still be up for doing some kind of fitness, it still gets to that like route, right? But it's like maybe I go and play football, maybe I go and play tennis. And the same thing, if you have a bunch of different default kind of recipes at your disposal, then if I didn't want to have chicken and rice, then I could have something else, right?
I get what you mean.
It's a good point. And it's interesting thinking of habits basically as just like solutions, behaviors that are solutions to these kind of underlying motives. Very interesting. And I think in that way, and I remember the first time I read this, I kind of took out this self-reinforcing, right? So that you don't just have this one solution, because let's say I don't want to go to the gym, or what's the alternative? Oh, it's to sit in front of the TV, right? Whereas if I've got loads of others that are propping me up, so it's like, oh, I don't go to the gym. Okay, well then I go and play football, or I go and play tennis or something like that. So it's like you're constantly being reinforced, even if you're not doing the only that habit.
I quite like the idea as well of then, I think this is actually from a different habit book, this whole idea of, having multiple, it could even be elastic habits or something, but I remember it being like, you almost mapping out the potential solutions, I guess, the habit. So like the habit or the thing you want to achieve is better health. And you map out like 5 different solutions for it in a physical kind of way. So we're not talking about nutrition here, but you'd be like, work out in the gym for an hour, then you'd have play tennis, play football. I don't know. You'd have, like you just said, multiple activities which achieve the same goal. And then you can just choose between. Because I feel like sometimes we're all a bit of like a one-trick pony. It's like we only know really how to do one, and therefore when we don't feel like it, we don't bother. Whereas because we have that desire to keep things the same, but we also have a desire for a bit of novelty, right? So it's like trying to get that balance. Because you might be like, oh, I've been doing this gym workout for the same thing for like 3 weeks. I just don't feel like it today. But it's like, okay, well, I can fit that sort of physical exercise, part of me that I need to fill in today by playing tennis or by doing some other thing or going for a jog. I don't know. But once again, maybe the best way of doing it is just jotting down all the options around that specific thing. What do you like to do in regards to physical exercise? And you write down all the answers, what you like to do. And then you can start realizing when, you get to that point, you have like a calendar bit saying this time I'm going to do this, like the implementation intention, except for you get to choose between the 5 things. Like, what do I feel like today? Bang, I'm going to do this one.
Well, exactly. Because I guess the habit ends up being like do fitness. And then the specificity is like do tennis or do football or do this, right? But like technically you're still doing, you can still do fitness at 6 o'clock in the evening, right? It's just a different type. The context slightly changes. But the specifics change.
No, of course.
But no, I do think by having like multiple options
it's
to
the
like
same,
back you up.
And it's not just sport. Sport just easily works with it, but you could do the same. Like you just said, recipes, right? You create more than one meal that you're good at, or that you can cook at least.
Yeah.
I mean, even better if you're doing the sort of more elastic based habits, which we'll get onto in a future book review, but you have ones based upon the amount of like effort that you can give to an activity. So you have one which is like full on, I've got energy, and one which is like low energy. So it's like having a pot noodle, ready to go. It's like, this is my low noodle. This is my low effort meal. But you can make it more healthy by having like a pre-prepared salad. You'd be like, this is my low effort meal when I can't be bothered. Yeah. And then this is my high effort meal. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. So he's got basically the points that we were just talking about. So your habits are modern day solutions to ancient desires. Our behavior is heavily dependent on how we interpret the events that happen to us, not necessarily the objective reality of the events themselves. Cravings are the feelings, desires, or urges that transform the cues we perceive and the predictions we make into a signal that we can apply. You are constantly sensing cues the entire time, but it is only when you predict that you would be better off in a different state that you can take action. I think that's quite interesting, actually.
I agree, but I also think sometimes that prediction takes place without you even knowing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You kind of get what I mean? So, like, there's times where you're like, oh, I can predict that going to the gym right now will be, really painful. And I can't be bothered.
Yeah.
But there's also times where, I don't know, you don't even think, like, for example, when you pick up your phone, I always use that as an example because for me, that's the most like unconscious one of them all. Yeah. And there's never a point where I predict that me picking up the phone is going to be better. It's like my body already knows that this high dopamine, response to what I'm about to see is better. And I don't even have a choice. It's not even my conscious awareness. It's like, I feel bad. I'm immediately picking up my phone without even predicting it. It's because my body already knows for a fact this is going to make me feel better. Does that make sense? Because you've always coded it in so tight that there is no room for like interpretation. It's not like, will it make me feel better? It's like, it is always going to make you feel better. But then it's the awareness that it's not actually that good for you in the long run. When you start thinking, is it helping me achieve my goals? That makes you realize that it's not good. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no.
Biologically, you always feel the pleasure. So biologically, it's you can't argue with the fact that it's, rewarding.
Yes. Yeah. No, I wonder if there's whether time comes into it. So let's say you have this change of state. You're bored. You don't have your phone on you. It's next door. I wonder if the longer that time goes on for being in that state, that you then become aware that you are bored rather than you're aware that you become bored straight away. So
yeah,
you get what I mean?
I kind of get what you mean, or at least the way I'm interpreting that is, for example, remember when we're using that 1 second app?
Yeah.
Can you remember that where you try and go on Instagram and it like blocks you for like, I don't know how long you can set at different timings and it will let you breathe. But I feel like that's what you're trying to get at, right? If there's like a time and space, you kind of then realize. Yeah, but I feel like it's more the break. It's more like the fact that my brain was anticipating an immediate like dopamine hit, but because of the pause, it kind of then I become conscious of the fact that exists to stop me from going on my phone.
Exactly.
Like the time then allows me to like, but it's not the time necessarily. I think it's more the pause or the break that shocks my system because I wasn't expecting to see that. I was expecting to see a news feed or whatever. I was expecting to see something else, but to see
I'm with you. Okay,
So it's less about time. It's more about it's more like it's a cue. Yeah. It's a cue that brings my conscious awareness back. So instead of being like normally, if I just pick up my phone now, let's just say I swipe, I immediately go onto my home screen, which is not that hasn't broke my pattern. But if I had coded in a thing to say every time I open my home screen, it asks me like, "What do you want to do?" I'd be like, "Oh,
yeah."
Like now you've reminded me that I don't want to be on my phone.
Yeah. No, exactly. I don't think that's a good point. Yeah.
And I don't think you can trust yourself when it comes to that type of like really tight knit dopamine reward system. Like you're just not conscious of it. You can't control it. I'm not convinced you can control it. You can only use tactics to like put it in other rooms where it doesn't exist.
Yes.
I genuinely don't believe there's any way you can stop it apart from putting in these places which puts, cues in your mind and pauses you. Because otherwise before it's too late, you're already on it for 10 minutes. I genuinely believe that, or at least that's how it happens for me.
Well, but it makes sense. It's like it depends on what's available around us, right? Like we're always going to crave these kind of things that can give us a dopamine hit, right? But if we don't have anything in our environment that can, then we'll go for the thing that will give us the most. But it won't necessarily be like, will be our phone or
no, you're
device,
right. No, there's plenty of times where I don't even think about my phone. It like, once again, like it just depends on the context of what's available around.
Yeah.
What else do you have? I think you got some actionable ideas coming up.
Yeah.
If you want to go into those.
So the gap between your current state and your desired state provides a reason to act. Our feelings and emotions tell us to either hold steady or to change states. It is emotion that allows you to mark things as good, bad, or indifferent. The actionable ideas that you were talking about. So by associating habits with positive feelings, we make them more attractive. And by highlighting the benefits rather than the drawbacks of a good habit, we can make it seem more attractive, which makes a lot of sense. And then obviously you can do it for the opposite. So likewise, by highlighting the negative of a bad habit, we make it seem less attractive.
And I think
it's very straightforward,
especially with some of these habits, it's actually more extrapolating out over time and realizing the effects on long term, like the effects long term, right? So like eating chocolate, eating something really high sugar, the attractiveness is obvious. The unattractiveness is less obvious, and that is, it's not good for your health. Is effectively a poison, right? And it's the same for the phone. Like the attractiveness is obvious. It feels great. You waste time. It depends how much. If you think it wastes your time, some people might not. But you're enjoying yourself in the moment while you're on social media, on your phone or whatever. But it's more the long-term effects, and you have to like characterize it or reframe it as like, if you want to achieve stuff in your life, how much time is it taking away from your life? If that makes sense. Like, how much time are you spending on this in comparison to doing stuff you want to do or think you want to do? And that's the only way in my head you make it unattractive, because it's hard to make something unattractive that is actually attractive.
Yeah, it's funny. I think this might be the first example where I think confirmation bias could play in your favor, because if you actively went out of your way to research only the bad things about a habit to make it seem less attractive, right? And then so that you would be less likely to do it, and you only look up the good things about the habits that you do want to do. Right.
This is my point yesterday with the nutrition, right?
No, exactly.
When you learn more about it, you start realizing the stuff you're putting in your body is terrible for you, right?
Yeah.
Or like you have a more nuanced understanding of the stuff you're doing. Because obviously everybody understands like calories in, calories out, fat, sugars to a degree, but you don't really understand what's going on.
No.
But once you start learning like the hormones and stuff behind what happens with, your insulin levels, etc., you might start thinking twice about the amount of sugar you're putting in your body. A bit like what we've seen with this alcohol podcast by Andrew Huberman.
Precisely, yeah.
And it's like, we already knew alcohol wasn't great, but we kind of like did the ostrich effect, when you stick your head in the ground and you think, la 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 la, like nothing's bad, nothing's bad. And you watch that podcast, like boom, there is nothing good about alcohol in any sense. Like it's just shit for you. It's just terrible. And then all of a sudden it makes, okay, like obviously you can't really get rid of it from your life, but you're now way more aware of the unattractiveness of the activity, which means you're more likely to be motivated against it, because you also then use the new image you have of it in comparison to, I guess, your ideal self of your life. And you're like, how does this fit into who I want to be? And you're like, oh, it doesn't. Okay, well, in that case, it's equally more unattractive or equally more motivating for me to just avoid doing these things.
No, absolutely. And like we were saying yesterday, it changes how you having more information in your mind will change how you interpret the behavior, which changes your relationship to it, right? If I read all about this nutrition stuff surrounding alcohol, okay, it changes how I interpret drinking alcohol, which changes the relationship to alcohol as being more negative. Right. And it's like, so you can convince yourself, you can hijack yourself in that sense to do the habits you want to do and get rid of the ones you don't.
No, it's for sure. Like I'm convinced that the looking into stuff more, will change it's always going to change your perspective on things, because the more you look into stuff, the more you realize your original models were wrong, and you have to like update them. It just makes sense.
Okay. So onto the next one.
Okay, I think yes. So we've got the third law: make it easy. In fact, wait, sorry. Do we have any points then on the inversion of the second one about make it? I guess it's just reframing it. What we were just saying then, right? The confirmation bias, trying to like understand why it should be unattractive.
Yeah.
By basically think of it in the long-term effects or the potential damaging effects of the thing you're doing. Yeah. And like you said, using confirmation bias to just like look up everything that's possibly bad about the current thing you're doing, but literally to scare yourself into realizing that you can't continue doing it long-term, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So yeah, the third law, make it easy. This heading, walk slowly, but never walk backwards. Okay. Planning, strategizing, and learning, brackets being emotion, are all good things, but they don't produce results. Only action does. Motion gives you knowledge, but action makes you embody it. Motion allows us to feel like we're making progress without running the risk of failure. When preparation becomes a form of procrastination, you need to do something. I remember this point actually about this whole, there's a difference between preparing and and actually doing the work. If that makes sense. It's like spending all your time researching a business rather than getting out there and making sales, or, it's talking, I guess it's the classic talking and strategizing rather than just doing.
Yeah.
And we're all guilty from it in some areas, because it's much easier to feel like you're making progress through, like the fact you're even talking about something makes you feel like you're doing something towards the thing you're talking about.
Yeah.
But more often than not, it's just, it's better than nothing, let's just say, but it's never the same as actually doing the work that you're meant to be doing.
Yes. No, 100%. It can be used
as procrastination.
It's better to just show up than to not show up at all. And I kind of take that attitude to the gym. Sometimes when I'm not really feeling doing a whole workout, the fact that I just turn up and I even just, might not do as much is better, because even if it's not pushing my body to the limit, it is pushing my mind, because I'm in a state where I didn't want to go to the gym in the first place. And yet I'm kind of trying to be resilient to that and overcoming that. And I still do a bit of physical exercise at the end of the day.
Well, and you've also just proved yourself, you've given yourself a little suggestion. This is the person who I am.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody who, doesn't listen to my brain and he does things anyway, even when I'm tired and don't want to.
Yeah, exactly. So I do think it is very important, and there's an actionable step here. So to master a habit, the key is to start with repetition and practice, not perfection. And I think it is so easy to fall into that trap of trying to perfect something, but actually you can't perfect something until you start it and you get feedback, right? Because that feedback allows you to build on it and know where it's wrong, where it's right, how to innovate it. But you can't do that if you never actually start. So
I guess another classic useful way of doing, sort of reframing that is I guess the problem is if you're a perfectionist, it's very hard, but just the idea that, perfection never really exists anyway. It's always you're always refining. Even the people who are the best of the best, they're always refining their game. They're always, coaching, learning, playing, you're never invincible, indestructible, unbeatable, perfect at anything. There's always room for improvement. And if you can I guess build that into yourself and realize that everything's just chipping away at the marble, trying to create, Michelangelo, then you might be able to live with yourself a bit better.
Literally. Okay, so then here it says long-term potentiation. So this is strengthening of connections between neurons in the brain based on recent patterns of activity. So I think this is basically getting at the idea that the more you do something, the easier it becomes. What is it? It's the neurons that fire together, wire together. Is it?
I think so. I think that is it. That's what I was going to say. So I might be something else, but
I should know this. I literally do this subject, but
neurons are fire together, wire together. It will make sense, I think.
Yes, the idea that our brains are very versatile and adaptable, and the more we do of one behavior, the more our brain kind of molds, so that it's called neuroplasticity. But the more that it kind of is able to achieve that behavior much more efficiently. So habits become easier the more you practice them, to the point where you can perform them automatically without thinking. And this is a process called automaticity. Habits form based on frequency, not time. And I think that's something that I think it's literally the next point. It's like people often asked him, how long does it take to form a habit, when really they should be asking how many repetitions are required to make a habit automatic. Because if you did something a couple times over the span of a month, then it's probably not going to be embedded. Whereas if you did it every day for 3 weeks, then you've got a much higher chance of it being embedded.
Yeah. It makes sense. I'm trying to think of really good example. Like when I personally get obsessed over certain things, whether it's a video game or stuff, it does become daily, and then I find it very hard to not do it. If that makes sense. And I guess this is part of what you're trying to say with this repetition. Like, let's just say I was to play a video game 3 times in a week. I think it's a lot easier to give up than if I played it every day for a week. If you play it every day for a week, you're wired in. It's like then the likelihood of me playing it again for another week is, 90% in comparison to like the sporadic use. Like sporadically doing anything is not going to get you wired in for a habit. But if you're doing it every day, then it is. Which I guess is why the first initial effort's always the hardest. But once you get past that first like month, or maybe even less than that, the first 2 weeks of trying to do something every day, it starts to become a bit easier.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Because think about it, like your brain is literally adapting to your behavior that you're doing, right? And if you keep doing something, then your brain is going to be like, okay, maybe we should start prioritizing this. This is something that he keeps doing. So, the brain changes. And so it's making it easier and easier and easier until it is basically made automatic, so that it's freeing up more space and energy, so that it doesn't require as much. And that's just like an evolutionary trait based, probably coming from survival in that sense.
Yeah. It would make sense, wouldn't it? That's the way it would wire itself, sort of.
Yeah. Okay, so then moving on. The law of least effort. So the law of least effort states that when deciding between 2 similar options, people will naturally gravitate towards the option that requires the least amount of work. The less energy a habit requires, the more likely it is to occur. In a sense, every habit is just an obstacle to getting what you really want. Example, dieting is an obstacle to getting fit. The more difficult it is to perform the habit, the more friction there is between you and your desired end state. The idea is to make a habit so easy to perform that you'll do it even when you don't feel like it. So that's kind of hacking back into that state, like we were just talking about before. It's like, if you're in this state, you want to make it so easy to do it, even when, like, if my gym is right downstairs and I'm not feeling like going to the gym, I can't really justify it. It's literally just downstairs. My gym isn't just downstairs. I wish it was, but maybe I've been working at that habit for a while. But yes, making it so easy that it's almost seamless to slip into, so that there's no friction to starting it. And then once you start it, and once it's embedded, then you can start, amping it up a bit. But it just needs to be really easy to start.
I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? This reminds me, and I think we will probably get onto the Tiny Habits at some point. Did you read Tiny Habits with his behavior?
I haven't actually, no.
With his behavior model, where he's got like behavior equals, I believe, MAP, B equals, motivation, action, and prompt, is it? No, motivation, ability, and prompt. And I think he talks a lot about, like, there's like an activation energy. It's like an activation energy to do any task. And obviously the lower the activation energy, the easier it is for you to do it. And an activation energy, is based upon your ability and then your motivation. So like,
makes sense.
Like if something's easy to do, your ability, or like, it and it's easy to do for you, you're more likely to do something. I mean, I could give you an example. Like, somebody who knows how to cook a meal, I don't. They'll be much more likely to get on and cook a meal than if somebody asked me to cook the meal. I'd be like, I don't know, like, where do I start? Right? Like, it's that type of thing. And I also find it quite funny when people, when somebody, like, for example, maybe your parents would give you like advice to do something, or like tell you to do something a certain way. The reason is because it's the only way they ever know how to do it. So if you do it in a different way, they're going to be like, oh, that's not how you do it. In reality, like you said, there's many ways to achieve the same goal with most things, right? Like, I find it so funny how the older you get stuck in your ways so much to the point where you'll be like, oh, you can't clean like that. You can't do it like that. I'm like, what do you mean? I've just done exactly the same thing you've done, but I've like wiped it a different direction.
Yeah.
And they're like, but that doesn't clean it. And it's funny because when you start questioning them, they have no reason, like no logical reason why it's wrong.
What was it called? Is it in difficult conversations where it's like implicit rules or something like that?
Yeah, no, it is that. It's like they've come over time to, there's only one way to do a specific activity, right? It's like, I mean, for example, for me, I will always cook my eggs with butter. And if I see somebody cook their eggs without butter, I'm like, what are you doing? But like, it's these small things that are like, you all come to learn by repetition. And like, sorry, more for me is the ability. Like you learn it in a specific way, which is why it's funny when you like artists learn under like somebody as an apprentice, they kind of pick up the habits and tricks of the person above them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then they say you only truly become yourself when you add your own little bit of flair to it. Or whatever. Sorry, I thought I'd add that because I do think a massive part of ease of doing is involves that model, which is first of all your motivation. Like if you've got high motivation, even if you have low ability, you're likely to get over that energy level. Or make like, you know, I mean, obviously the easier you make it anyway, the more likely you are to do it. But then there comes a point where if you've got like a low ability at something, it has to be really, really easy to figure out because otherwise you're not going to do it. Yeah. If that makes sense.
And I think there's multiple ways that we can make it easy. One of the ones that he mentions is basically optimizing your environment. So like fitting a habit into the flow of your daily routine. So it's like going to work and going to the gym. If the gym is on the way, then, you know, you kill two birds with one stone in that sense. So there are multiple ways of making it much easier. And the same goes for like by removing the points of friction that sap our time and energy, we can achieve more with less effort. So the things that are getting in the way that are frictionless.
The friction points are actually almost endless with most activities I've thought about. Like I was thinking about recently, obviously I've just come back to the UK, even today with the gym. So I haven't gone, funny enough. The friction point was sorting out my membership. So I actually achieved that friction point today. I sorted out my membership. I've messaged the person. They've agreed to like let me go because they usually do like a subscription basis, whereas 2 months minimum. But then the next friction point is what time do I go? And then the next friction point is what do I do in the gym? And luckily for a few of these things, I got it sorted out. Like I'm still going to continue doing the same things I was doing back when I was in France. But like you can see how these friction points add up. Because it's not just one decision. There's like 5 or 6 decisions to make, especially if it's somebody who's never been before. Like to start fresh is like, what gym am I going to? How am I going to get there? What time am I going to do it? How am I going to make sure I go consistently? What am I going to eat because I'm going to the gym now? Does that mean I have to change my diet? What do you know what I mean? Is the questions are almost endless. And this is why I feel like with these friction points, it's probably best to like first, or at least for me, it would be first thing in the morning, mapping out like what are the decision points I have to do for this specific habit. So if you've got this habit as I want to do this more, then write out every potential friction point you have and deal with it when you have high energy. Because when you have low energy, you're not going to
do it. You're really not.
Yeah. Like even today, I knew I'm actually pretty happy I did the booking the membership. That was my main goal. I knew I wasn't going to go, but I was like, at least if I can book and make sure I've got a membership, it means then, you know, at least now the barrier, that is the big barrier for me. Now I can just go at 10 in the morning tomorrow and I'll, you know, it's done.
And I think it is like tying it back to what you were saying earlier on with the activation energy and how, you know, it is your ability and motivation. And I always find that when I start doing loads of little tasks, I get more motivated and then I can finally tackle that thing that I've kind of been putting off. You know, it's like that motivation to do whatever, but it's like I'm in that state where I'm motivated to be productive.
Funny enough, I find, so obviously, you could probably start the day off with loads of mini tasks, but one thing I like to do about how you keep your mind books an absolute mess, and I jot things down that I need to do all the time. But I'll go back through like the pages the last couple of days and I'll see stuff I haven't done for like 5 days. And then I'll do those first. And for some reason, that gives me even more motivation. It's like, this one I haven't bothered to do because I know it's like, it's a bit crap. It's not something I wanted to do. But when I'm fresh in the morning and I see it from 5 days ago, I finally got to be able to tick it off. And then you feel really good about it.
You feel really good.
I've finally done that. But I get what you mean with the whole, you build up like momentum, don't you? You build up like energy based upon the fact that you've proven to yourself that you can do these things.
And I think I get motivation when I tick something off or I put something in my to-do list that I literally am doing right now and then tick it off.
Or like, or you've even finished the activity. You're like, right,
yeah, that's the point. Yeah, exactly.
The point is, I think it, by the way, I think that you'll see this in the now habit. I think he does talk about it. It's like you're building up, like, because you have done the thing that you said you've done. It was an actual action and a task you've achieved. So like sometimes, because if you're not documenting down all the tasks you're managing to achieve, you forget that you've actually managed to do a lot more than you think.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah,
like,
no, absolutely.
You know, unless you're, you know, there's plenty of things I haven't written down, which I've done today, which aren't on my sheet. But if I was to write it, then I would be, wow, like, look, I've actually done a lot today. If that kind of makes sense. And that's why I think it has a big effect on you. You kind of realize, actually, I thought I wasn't doing much, but the reality is it's only because I haven't written it down and become aware of it. But once I do, so I've actually done the loads.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
It's always going to make you feel good.
Yeah. Yeah. So another one of his actionable ideas is basically the central idea is to design an environment, which we said, where number one, our cognitive load is lightened, and two, doing the right thing is as easy as possible. And I think he had some like weird kind of example of like resetting the room, so to prepare for your next action. Or it was like an example of someone in his book that had done it. So where like when you're watching TV, the guy places the remote back on the TV stand, arranges the pillows on the couch, and folds the blankets. So next time it's easier to get into the habit, whatever it is. So you're preparing for the next time you're going to engage in that habit because you want it to be as easy as possible. And if you've already engaged in it and you're already doing it, then it's not that much extra to do.
I quite like that. I just come up with an idea as well for the tabs.
Yeah.
Like every time you finish a task, you close the tab and you open a new one. Even if it needs the same tab. That's going to sound really crazy. Like even if you need to use, even if you're still in the same like tab or the same email, you've done your task, bang, reload it. You're starting afresh. The next task. I quite like the idea of like, like you said, you create a transition almost. You know? Like this is like a symbolic ritual based ending of the last task and onto the new. It's like you're reborn, the Lion King. Or whatever.
And I think the same thing. I think the same thing could also apply. Like it's also the inverse, right? Like, so if you don't want to do a habit, if I don't want to watch TV, then make it more difficult, like hide the remote or put it in a cupboard or something like that. So that it's like, I know that there's more friction to actually sitting down and watching TV. Make it more difficult so that
put it in a safe,
literally
get somebody else to gum up the key code and then get them to tell somebody else and then get them to burn it or something, like write down random numbers, and then you have to like ask like 5 people to end up getting it.
Well, it depends how much you want to do that behavior, isn't it? Like
that would be for like some serious addicts if you had to do that. But you could,
wouldn't it? But like he even had an example that was kind of weirdly similar, where he put the TV in a cupboard after every time he watched it.
Yeah.
You know, it was something like that. So that like there's too much friction that the only time you're really ever going to get it out is when you really, really want to. Like it makes a lot of sense.
It does. It does.
Yeah,
it's the classic. Like I think you've done it a few times before, like deleting Instagram from your phone, or even just signing out. Anything where there's too much like effort, you know.
Yeah.
I think there's other ones where it's like you give your friend your password to Instagram, they change the password for you, and then
yes, I've heard it. Yeah,
you have to like ask them for it, and that's also equally as embarrassing because you got the social pressure of like you've told your mate that you don't want to go on it, and then you have to be like, oh, can you send me the can you send me the code? And they go like, why do you want to use it? You're like, oh, I don't know. Like,
I don't.
yeah.
No, exactly. All right, so on to the next one.
Yes.
So how to stop procrastinating by using the 2-minute rule. Do you want to take this one?
Yep. So habits are automatic choices that influence the conscious decisions that follow. They can shape the actions that you take for minutes or hours afterward. Your options are constrained by what's available. They are shaped by the first choice. So you need to master the decisive moments. So the 2-minute rule is when you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. Okay, yes. I do remember this. Isn't this to do with obviously trying to maximize the frequency? A bit like we were saying before, where you build a habit less about time, but more about the amount you do it. Yeah. So it's saying something like, if you want to build up a habit of, I don't know, being more active, you just get down and do like 2 minutes worth of press ups. Is that correct?
Yeah. Because you're more, once again, it it kind of applies to that commitment and consistency, like influential principle, isn't it? It's like you've already started, you're more likely to commit and follow through with it.
Yes, no, you got another good example here, which is like cab to the gym and not the gym. So like if you just focus on the bit which kickstarts the habit, you're going to end up following through. You got another one, the one page. You know, I'm going to read one page of my book tonight. Most people will read more because, you know, you've read a page. I do like that. I think especially for people who like, you know, I don't know about you, but I find it sometimes hard to like choose between maybe books I'm going to read or like, because I'm always juggling quite a few. And if I spent less time thinking about which book I'm going to read and just picked up a book and read a page, I would read more books. Yeah. Because I spend a lot of time deliberating, which one do I want to read right now? Just like fucking just pick one up and just start reading, you know? It's just like, God damn it, Jess, sort yourself out.
And I think the habits that we normally have are quite, like we were talking about yesterday with the implementation intention thing, is that a lot of the time our habits are pretty vague, right? Like go to the gym, which means get to the gym, do a workout, you know, it's like it encapsulates loads of other different tasks. And if there's already a lot of friction to doing that already, then break it down and just get it to the first task. So like you just said, like get a cab to the gym, right? Not do a workout today.
Pick up book, read first page. Like don't even think about anything else. Your task is just to read the page and then see what follows. Because that was the point actually, which we were saying above, which is like, I think what was the saying? Like you can shape the actions you take for minutes or hours afterward. Yeah. Because if you just shape those first few minutes and get those first few minutes right, the next hour is going to be fine. Like if you get in that cab to the gym, you're going to end up doing an hour of a workout, most likely. If you pick up your book and read a page, you're going to probably read your book for 20 minutes. Yeah. Unless, of course, other things come up. But, you know, the point being, you've created the momentum to start it. You've got past that, you know, like we said, activation energy stage. Yeah. You're now in the process of doing the habit. You're unlikely to stop. Like, I can think of another example right now. I'm trying to floss more.
Yeah, same.
The commitment should be pick up the floss stick. That's it. That's all I have to do. Is every night pick up the floss. That's all I have to focus on. And if I pick up the floss, I've won. Because I know if I pick up that floss, there's no way I'm not putting it between my teeth. Because that would be the weirdest thing to be like, okay, thank you.
Nope.
Yeah, thanks. God, well, that's actually just, I'm going to write that down. Look at this. Pick up. Yeah, mate. I actually haven't thought about it that way because that's obviously such a minor task that's obviously easy to do. It's like there's a floss literally there waiting for me to pick up. I don't know about you. I have the picks rather than the
I've got the picks as well. No, but all you have to do is literally just start the habit, because once you've started the habit, you're so much more likely to follow through, right? And it's like it shouldn't feel like a challenge. That the rest of the action may be challenging, but as soon as you've started, then you're more likely to follow through.
It reminds me, by the way, a lot of the getting things done, you know, the next action step, like always thinking like, what's the next thing to do? And then focusing on that. And to be honest, I actually do find that quite useful in my day to day as well. Like I've got a few things here, which I remember earlier, I was just thinking, so I had to basically reply to an email and I had like a bunch of things I wanted to say. And I was like, look, just stop fucking thinking about what you're going to say. Just go onto the email and put in his name. And at least once you're started, it's like once I started going on the thread and looking at the email, I then became invested in the task and did it. But until that point where I was like, forget about what you're going to say, just open up the email and then it comes. Because that's all you have to do. Once you're on the page, it's very hard to not continue with the action. You've already taken the step.
Exactly.
I mean, there's other ones, wasn't there? There wasn't even just the cab. It's like, put your gym clothes on.
Yeah.
You know, there's also other ones you could do. I was thinking, I don't know if it was this book, but like, let's say you're at a dinner. You could create a rule where the first thing you have to pick up is a vegetable always. So like if you're serving yourself food, you create a rule to yourself. The first thing you have to do, no matter what, is pick up the spoon for the vegetable plate. Like there's loads of little things you could do that would, I know you didn't struggle with that. So you're sat there just going like, that's all I would do.
I would have already finished all my vegetables. No, it is true. It's just like, it's just think about the first action towards that habit that you want to complete, and then try and make that, you know, as easy as possible.
That's because, I need to add that onto the Notion stuff.
To
like,
the Notion, mate. Yeah,
like to the next, like first action linked.
And then I came up with this this action, but basically like map out your habits and then establish how difficult they are and adjust them accordingly so that they are easier. So like if you have a list of habits, like some are going to be easier than others. Some you don't like. I'm going to go to the gym anyway. I don't need to,
no, 100%.
Think about putting on my my gym.
Some things for some people are easier than others as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So with those ones that are a bit more difficult, scale them down. Right? Think about, okay, well, what's the first action towards this one? Or what's the third action towards this one? It's like it's on a scale at the end of the day. And I think he talks about this actually later on. So, where is it? Yeah, so first of all, it's better to just show up. We've talked about that earlier on. And then, so master the habit of showing up. A habit must first be established before it can be improved, which makes it's obviously so much common sense, but actually a lot of the time we convince ourselves to not just do it. Like I used to have the worst mindset towards the gym because I'd be like, oh, I can't do what I want today, so I'm just not going to go. Or or it would be the most stupid idea. It's like, oh, it's a Wednesday and I've missed the point that I was supposed to do this part of my body, so I can't do it. And I was just, just the most stupid mindset.
It's funny with the way that you say that, because even today I was thinking, like, the way I rationalized it was, it's Wednesday, which means, I can fit 2 days in before the weekend. I can fit in, the same routine. Like, do you got what I mean? Like, instead of doing the Tuesday, I was kind of making up reasons. But there is no reason for like the day to like mean anything. I mean, your brain's very good at like convincing you of anything, isn't it? It just comes up with reasons. Like it's fascinating.
No, that's really good. And then I'll tell you what, on that note, so his to build on the 2-minute rule, he says, if you feel like you're forcing yourself, right, to do the 2-minute rule, then do it for 2 minutes and then stop. And you'll just see how much you'll just continue on. Because it'll be stupid. Imagine going for a run, okay, and then you go for 2 minutes and you're like, oh no, I'm going to go back now. Like it just, you're just not going to do it.
I think you'd be surprised. I reckon there'd be a few people who just like stop me up. Oh, that's me done.
Maybe.
You like to think most people, the momentum would carry them.
I think so. And if you're applying all the other like rules as well, then like hopefully, you're going to follow through with it eventually. But basically the idea is to start mastering the first 2 minutes of the smallest version of the behavior, right? If it's like particularly difficult, and then you can start applying more difficulty or applying it to the next action. If there's like 10 actions in the whole like habit that you want to complete, then maybe apply it to the next one and the next one. So that way, eventually it's like, okay, I'm just going to go to the gym. I don't need to think about putting on my gym clothes anymore. You're scaling it up. Okay. And then last part.
So we got to how to make good habits inevitable and bad habits impossible. So this is the inversion of the third law, behavior change, make it difficult. And I believe we did roughly touch on this first one earlier with the stick, but the commitment device. It's a choice you make in the present that controls your actions in the future. They let you capitalize on good intentions before falling victim to temptation. So the most common, we spoke about this before, actually, I think on the last one, which is, you can do like a public commitment device where you sort of publicly tell people, like you post on Facebook, whatever, you post to your friends saying, hey guys, by the way, I'm doing this now. And that is going to use commitment and consistency to convince you to, or like to make it pain for you to renege on, the agreement you've made publicly. Then you have the more sort of punishing commitment devices where you actually bet money. So there's the one that we were talking about earlier called stick, where, for example, you can put, I think it's like any amount, technically. You could even put like hundreds of, even thousands if you really wanted to. I mean, it just depends how painful you want to make it.
Exactly.
But you could basically put into a sort of like escrow account. I'm putting 100 quid in here and somebody's going to be my judge. And if I renege on the thing I'm saying I'm going to do, this money goes to the charity I hate, or I guess it just goes anywhere. But it's I guess the whole point is being the pain of losing the money. So it's like, I guess it's, it's just a way of creating another barrier to doing the thing that you don't want to do. I remember seeing there was a guy who did, I don't know if you saw it, it's like on Twitter, he used to post every morning. He created like a scheduled tweet and he's like, if I haven't posted win like 100 quid or something. I thought that was quite good. I think it might be Thomas Frank actually, or somebody like that.
Clever, very clever.
But it's a really good sort of, I've never really experimented it properly, and I probably should, to be honest. I feel like maybe I'm actually scared of the pain, because I just feel like I've not got the minerals to stick to the thing I'm saying, if that makes sense. I haven't done that full identity change because I'm scared that this £100 I'm going to bet I'm going to fail miraculously.
Fear of failure,
possibly.
Yeah.
But
I think so building on this, what I found really interesting is you can also, so we had a point here, and it was like the idea is to make it difficult to break a good habit and easy to break a bad one. But basically, you want to increase the friction until it is so impractical that you don't even have the option to act. So what was the option and what was the example that he had? So yeah, he had some weird one like cutting calories. So ask the waiter to split my meal and box half of it to go before the meal is served. So he literally cannot eat his whole meal, right? Like that's drastic. I don't think I'd ever do that at a restaurant personally. But the point being is, and it's like, it's so impractical to break the good habits. That's what you want to be able to do. Thinking about your future self and what you might like, think about all the, like we were talking about yesterday, think about all the cues that could possibly tempt you, right? The ways to tempt you about breaking a good habit, and then trying to like, hide them, or make them impractical.
I remember an example he was giving, but I don't know whether it's too related to this one, where it's like buy smaller plates. Yeah. Do you remember that one? It was just like smaller plates, and this is more for like cues, I guess. It was to showcase portion sizes. Yeah. If you had smaller plates, you limit the amount of food you can put on a plate, but it also makes smaller portion sizes look larger. And the point being to just basically eat less. You become more conscious of it because you look at it and you go, this is ridiculous. Look how much food's on my plate. And then it's like, I'm doing this because I'm eating less.
Yeah.
But
that makes sense.
And I like this other one. What's this one? Turn to technology to automate it for you. Okay, I like that. So engage in one-time choices that make it easier to automate your future habits. So signing up for a pension, that's like a one-time thing you do. I guess you could even argue the standing order, signing up for investments. There's plenty of platforms that allow you to like set up a standing order to send, I don't know, £100 a month to a savings pot and then invest it automatically. So that's these things that, that you don't have to think about again. And then you've got this buying a new mattress, I guess. What was that for? Was that more
I don't actually know what the example was. Maybe it was for sleep or something like that. Like
no, but it does make sense, isn't it? Like it's a one-time purchase, but it's going to help your sleeping habits, right? Like got a comfier bed, you sleep better in it. I mean, once again, if you really think about it, sleep's one of the most important things you can have anyway, which helps all your habits because you're going to have more energy if you sleep well. So
yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, what you're essentially doing is designing your environment, right? So that you have certain options available, and you want all those options to basically be productive or to be good, right? So like, that's why it's important to, when you do make those like decisive moments, right? The ones that could either lead you down where you're like going to be on the couch all day, not really doing anything, or the ones where you've like done a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of want to be able to make it so that it's harder to sit on the couch and watch TV all day and easier to do the opposite. And so,
And so that was the third law of behavior change.
Yes.
I don't know where that accent came from.
Go with it.
Shall I replace it? So perfect. I think we're gonna stop here, aren't we? I think we're gonna use the next podcast to go over the fourth law and then just do a summarization of everything with advanced techniques, I believe.
I think so. Yeah.
And I think, I don't know about you, but that's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Beautiful. Hey guys, well there you have it. We hope you enjoyed that book summary. Now we know it can be a lot to take in all at once, so if you want to be able to read this in a more palatable size, or you want to be able to implement any of those key actionable ideas that we were talking about in this episode, head on over to our website at wisewords.blog, where the book summary will be waiting for you. Also, don't forget to check out our socials, as we consistently upload the key ideas, benefits, and actionable ideas from all the books that we read. The links to those will be in the description below. Now, we want to be able to get you the best content in a way that's really easy to understand, but we need your help. Your opinion matters. So you are our feedback mechanism. And with those quick actions, whether that's leaving us a like or a dislike, commenting in the comment section below, or subscribing to our channel, all of those help us gauge what we're doing well and how to improve on our method of delivery. So if you have any thoughts on the matter, don't hesitate to act. It takes less than 10 seconds and it really helps us out. But with all that being said, until next time, stay wise.